Today, our guest is Ravi Chunilal, and he is the managing director of Capital World, which runs Kiara Garments in Vietnam. It's a factory that he established in 2016 and has been running it since then. Ravi, welcome to Thriving in the Age of Disruption podcast series. I'm excited that we get to do this podcast with you in the studio in Ho Chi Minh City and me in Singapore.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm honored and happy to be here.
That's really great, Ravi. We want to get candid sharing from change makers like yourself.
I can give you a little introduction about myself. So, I'm ethnically Indian, but my grandfather left India before independence from the United Kingdom. So he went over to one of the other British colonies called Fiji. It's an island out in the Pacific. And that's sort of where our family business started. I won't talk too much about those times because it wasn't much to do with me. But long story short, there was a need to set up a trading post in Hong Kong to be able to access Chinese goods. And the intention at that point was to export to the Pacific Islands because that's where we had a stronghold with our family business, network of distribution, amongst other things. And one thing led to another, and we realized that once we were in Hong Kong, then the whole world was a potential market. So that sort of got us really into the trading, importers, distributors, wholesalers, whatever you want to call it, and needed all kinds of things from China. And Hong Kong was, at that point, the gateway. Step by step, fast forward maybe 30 odd years, my father started, when he went on his own, he took a liking for textiles. And I was born in Hong Kong. I didn't live in Hong Kong for very long at all. I grew up in Taiwan, where my father and my mother ran the textile trading company, so exporting fabrics that were made in mills in Taiwan to wholesalers and garment manufacturers all over the world. I went to the Taipei American School, so that's why I sound maybe a little bit American. Then I went to college in the U.S., in Boston at Northeastern University. I studied business there for my bachelor degree. And at that point, mom and dad had already moved to Shanghai because Taiwan had become less and less competitive with the advent of China, the opening of China. This was around 2000 when we set up an office in Shanghai. And so I joined the family business in 2005 in Shanghai, which we were primarily a textile trading company at that point. So I got trained in that environment and in that business model. But my dad and I had a conversation once saying that the margins in this trading business, especially with, Alibaba had just sort of started becoming what it is today. With the advent of technologies like that, the need for a trading company in China was becoming less and less. So therefore, margins were being hit. So then I asked my dad, why don't we do some more value addition and take the fabrics that we are selling and make them into finished products. Around 2007 or so, we started that. We obviously had no expertise as to what to do with the fabric after it was ready. So we had to hire some people and bring the knowledge in. And one thing led to another, and that business became serious in a few years, by 2010 or so. And then China started becoming very expensive, at least in the segment I was in. I was a little bit more mass market at that point, and price was very sensitive. So we started looking for offshore countries where the cost was lower in Southeast Asia. And that's when I landed up in Hanoi. And we found that the business environment for garments manufacturing in Vietnam was a very good fit for us because we understood fabrics very well. We understood raw material. We understood how to sell. And the factories here generally didn't know how to do all that. They only knew how to manufacture. They focused very much on what happens inside the factory floor. So it was a good sort of marriage, if you will. And that was the first few years where volumes grew quite a bit. The third year when we set up the office in Vietnam, our sales grew 400% in 1 year. And that's when we realized that this is going to be the future of the business. And then we decided to set up a factory. So for the first time since my grandfather in the 1930s left India till that point, we'd never owned any manufacturing facility. So it was a very bold move, a very risky move maybe by some people in my family, were not very supportive of it, but my mother was very much supportive, and I had the business model behind me. I had the support of our clients. And so we set up the factory in 2016. And that's when I moved to Hanoi to look after the factory. Although I'd never looked after a factory before, so I didn't really know what I was going to do. But I did it almost 9 years in. We've been successful. We have over 1,000 employees now. We export around 10 million garments a year. So we've done well for ourselves, professionally managed business. Of course, the journey ahead is still long. Going back to myself, ethnically Indian, but I never lived in India. And of course, I speak Hindi, I speak Gujarati, which is where my family is from. But my personality, even the way I do business, a lot of that is very Chinese. It's not a common combination when you see somebody that looks like me, but read, writes, speaks Chinese, even thinks in Chinese.
Wow, that's really an awesome journey from the 1930s. In 6 years, it'll be 100 years. That's the essence of entrepreneurship. This podcast series to inspire people to look at entrepreneurial mindset as an essential skill set for today's VUCA world, because we are constantly dealing with disruption, and the entrepreneurial mindset will allow us to adapt, pivot, and be effective in the face of change. So how do I define that? So there are three things that you'll essentially have. One is being resourceful, and which is that you're able to define the problem correctly. And we know that if you do that, then it's already half solved. Then number two is, being able to manage uncertainty and take risk. And the last bit is creating value, both financial and non-financial, for your stakeholders as well as for yourself. I'm really interested in your story in terms of what had you be entrepreneurial and take that bold step towards manufacturing and becoming a garment producer and not staying as a trader.
Yeah, I'll start with how I ended up joining the business. I wasn't groomed. My parents didn't put any pressure on me saying, you must join. I'm the only child, by the way. So the pressure was there symbolically because I knew that I was the only child, but no pressure was put on me saying, you must join this business. They told me, if you can figure out something on your own, we're more than happy for you. So for a while, I did think that, yes, I could do something like that and tried. I did do an internship at a big Fortune 500 company. It's called Gillette, based out of Boston. And I very quickly realized in that 6 months that this corporate ladder is very difficult to climb. And it may not necessarily be totally based on my hard work or my skills. I quickly realized that the payback versus effort that you put in our own business was going to be infinitely higher, probably incomparable to any other opportunity that I would come across. So that's how I decided that, okay, once I'm done with college, I will join the business. I had the fortunate situation where I was moving back to a country where I didn't grow up, but yet I spoke the language. I knew the culture, right? Taiwan and China. So it was a very easy place for me to adapt to.
Yes.
And that probably helped me learn the business much quicker. So that's me joining the business part started and how I got familiar with the business. I grew up in an environment where we're constantly looking for opportunities, and I was no different. So once I saw that the margins on trading business were diminishing, I decided that we should add more value to demand the margin that we would like for our lifestyle, for our savings, for our future generations, whatever. Everyone has a different drive. For me, it was building a business that was competitive and well-respected, well-reputed, was probably the bigger driving force than the financial success. I was perhaps a little lucky where I was maybe born with a silver spoon in my mouth, so I didn't need to find the income to buy my dinner. My drive was really about building a business. The other thing that I noticed is when I joined a family-run business, people were in positions because they were family, not because they were the best for the job. Now, many things were done perhaps not the way I was taught with the American business education. For the first few years, I may have thought this and that. I was inexperienced at that point. But then when I really started understanding the value of having the right people in the right place, in the right positions, irrespective of whether they're family or not, was very important. I would say probably since 2010, I'd become confident enough myself. I was also well respected within the family to be able to get carte blanche on what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it, right? Provided, of course, I had to still sell the story.
I love the fact that you had this realization during your internship that the payback versus the effort working for someone else is never going to be as much as what you can get in your own business. And I also like the fact that you went to Taiwan and then to China. And you saw that as an advantage because China was opening up. You knew Chinese, the language, the culture, and those are easy leverage points for us to manage our risk and uncertainty when we start a business. You'd learned about the importance of business model, strategy, professionalizing when you were there in the US.
In terms of running a professionally run business, I did major in entrepreneurship. So there was a lot of inferences to family run businesses and how some of them went bust or maybe didn't do very well because some changes were not made. Understanding that the change is the only constant and you have to keep changing with times. But in my journey, once I was in China and traveled the world, I met some very interesting individuals that were running businesses or maybe working in senior positions in very, very large businesses. And I realized how that having the right setup in terms of people, infrastructure, hierarchy will help you scale very quickly. So that was probably a realization that how it happened. It wasn't an aha moment, right? It was over a long period of time, traveling around the world, meeting customers, meeting maybe even competitors, right? And understanding, saying, oh, wow, they do it this way, then why shouldn't we? And this process of trial and error has also taught me a lot, right? Sometimes what I see as a structure for someone else that works for them may not work for us, right? And finding that hybrid in between or whatever solution fits you. Going back to this entrepreneurial mindset, I think it's important for entrepreneurs that are younger to have their mindset be configured that disruption and change will happen. You have no one else to blame but yourself if you're not prepared for it. That's the way I look at that, right? This whole journey of setting up a factory here in Vietnam, dealing with government bureaus, land acquisition, building up, hiring workers. We have 1,000 people today. And that journey taught me a lot as well. Right? And if I was there with a very rigid mindset saying, well, no, this was the plan, why aren't we doing it? And then get too hung up on that, I wouldn't get here. I always like to focus on finding the solution to the problem and analyzing why that problem occurred later. Sometimes you may not even get to it. It doesn't matter. You've solved it.
I want to sort of go back to what you said in the beginning about you taking the business into manufacturing. And that whilst you had a lot of respect amongst family members because you had proven your worth, plus you were a good storyteller in your own words, and your mother was your key supporter. So where was that creative tension coming from? Because you're the only child. Was it from the cousin consortium and other members of the extended family?
Yes, it was my father. He wasn't a very big challenger, but he was at the same time not a very big supporter. He was sort of neutral. To tell a family business that I need a few $1 million to set up a factory, you need more than just neutral. You need hands-on support. And my mother was the one that provided that. We had some uncles in the business that were also skeptical. I very quickly realized that our Fiji side of the family, my mother's from India, right? She was born in India. And my father's side is from Fiji. My Fiji side of the family, because of that island life and the beach and let's go for beers at 4 p.m. and not worry about anything else. They're sort of groomed in a culture where you structure a business to do the minimum so that you don't have to work too hard. And that just wasn't how I grew up. Taiwan, Hong Kong, China, even India with the ethnicity factor, right? Some of it does definitely carry over. Hard work was definitely something. You don't shy away from it. Let's say the more complex your business model is, the more margin you can demand. right?
That's true.
Because there's fewer people willing to do it. And that supply demand factor, I understood that very quickly. Saying, yes, I'll have to hire 30 more people than somebody else. I know I can demand a bigger margin, right? So we still have the trading business part as a part of our model, which is less than 20%. But the margins that it creates are 1/3 of the margins we create. The trading model would not have been scalable to this level at this point, right? Because of the opening up of China, Alibaba. The Chinese have also, now started speaking English, traveling the world. And, the need for a middleman that maybe was a translator or a financer or somebody that maybe had understood fashion or something like that. The need for that has become less and less because the manufacturers in China are able to fill that gap very quickly now.
Thank you for decoding that journey for us. One last question around family business. So, what's your assessment of being in a family business? What makes it work and what doesn't make it work?
The good thing about family is you can trust from day one.
Mm.
Right? When you hire people that are professional, it takes a little time to build that rapport. But for me, now our business has reached, we have a system of checks and balances. So it's not all about trust. We don't have to worry about somebody running away because the business is set up in a way that no one person can do that. A professionally run business cannot rely on one person. It has to be team. It's not distrust that drove me to set up this system, but more just performance.
My doctorate thesis was on innovation and creativity in family businesses. And so what you're talking about is setting up processes, systems, and making sure that these are transparent so that you can drive performance across the board. Because if you really look at your 1,000-odd people, maybe 5 members are from the family itself. The rest of them are non-family members.
Actually, it's only 2, me and my father. My mother passed away a few years ago. My father's now 70s, taken much of a backseat. I'm really the only family member left running the business.
Wow.
And that's also maybe what drove me to have it professionally run, saying I don't have any more family members to farm this out to, right? So my daughter's only 11. I don't have expectations for you to join the business. You're welcome, but you're not required to. That drove me to do it this way.
Great. So is there any crisis or challenge that you had to navigate in family business? Although now it's pretty much being founder driven. What was the typical challenge for the family business?
I joined the business with still my mother and father. My uncle was part of it too. How you do conflict resolution in a family environment versus a business environment is different. Feelings, emotions, even respect, right? If it's my uncle who's older than me, I believe you understand Indian culture, right? So telling somebody that's older than you and saying that you think that they're wrong is different, right? So yeah, there were a lot of challenges. I think I learned as I went along. I must have hurt some feelings before I realized saying, oh, well, I need to ask this way and that way and sort of be a little bit more diplomatic. Diplomacy, even in a professionally run business, in my case, it was Indian. So Chinese culture is a little bit different. Vietnamese culture is a little different. There will be certain changes in how you handle the family crisis management.
Let's move on to the second mindset that I feel is important in today's world of disruption, and that is a crisis-ready mindset. And I'm sure that you've had to deal with crisis, whether personally or from a business perspective. And when you look back, what were the things that made it easy for you to pick up the pieces and to find a solution and move on? So what was your coping mechanism and support structure?
So, in one phrase, it's this motto of stopping at nothing. You may struggle, but you have to move forward. And I have a nice example to give you. COVID-19, it was a disruptive time for everyone. In our particular case, we had one situation where late 2020 or early 2021, where Vietnam was still practicing zero COVID policy, right? So some COVID cases creeped up in a district adjacent to where our factory was. And we had about 100 workers from that district come to us every day via a ferry. So as soon as cases were picked up in the other district, the local authorities and the ferry operator decided to stop operations. Now, for us, that meant 100 less workers. That means how many pieces per day less in productivity. We have our delivery commitments and all that. So HR admin director called me and he goes, oh, well, I said, well, this not having those 100 workers is not an option. We'll test them and to make sure that our people are safe and that we're complying with the rules. But you need to talk to the government authorities and find a way to keep the ferry running. Ramesh, you won't believe it, but we became a garment manufacturer as well as a ferry boat operator. So my people were sitting with a checklist on the other side of the river because the government allowed us to do it, saying, provided you administer it and you manage this, and if there's any problems, it's your fault. We negotiated with them saying, yeah, we'll do it, but we'll only let people that are working in our factory use the ferry. And they were fine with that. And the ferry operator was fine with that. To answer the question, like, how is it that you battle in moments like this? If you go back to the statement I said earlier, don't stop at anything. If it means you have to operate the ferry, and if it's worthwhile, obviously. If it economically didn't make sense to operate the ferry for 100 workers, then obviously we wouldn't do it, right? So the business has to make sense.
I love that because that's a mantra, right? It's like an affirmation that keeps you really focused on results and performance. And like you said, it also has to make financial sense. But then how do you take that mindset that you have as the owner and transfer that to your management?
I didn't have to convince anyone very hard saying we need to do this. I just said, we can't afford to lose 100 workers. You need to find a solution. And they did. Right. So I think some of it is the resilience that the Vietnamese people have because you're constantly dealing with these kinds of disruptions, changes in government laws or interpretation of the laws. Some can differ from 1 hour to the next sometimes. So that's there. I can't pinpoint it, Ramesh, but I think I have definitely been able to achieve having a team that is very resilient. And I don't know if it's me or the culture that's been set. I don't know how I ended up here, but I'm happy where I ended up.
That's great. So where are you in your spiritual journey?
This whole positive, the flow of energies and karma is pretty much where it stops. I practice yoga. I practice a little meditation. That's more for fitness, not really for connection to a spiritual being or something like that. I'm not very religious either. We're Hindus. We practice our festivals and celebrate. I believe in karma. I believe in positive deeds, achieve positive payback or results. I believe in positive energies. So there's something in Hindi called Vastu, the Indian Feng Shui. Our houses, our factories, offices, everything that we operate or we live, the entrance, the door entrances, the position of the beds, where the bathrooms need to be. I pay attention to all that. So I'm a little bit of a traditionalist that way. Even my parents didn't really believe in it as much as I do. I don't know why.
And do you think that it's possible to live a simple life? And what's your definition of a simple life?
I was reading these topics with my wife this morning, and she started laughing as soon as the simple life came up. I'm sorry to say, but I love luxury. I love, luxury clothing or travel, or I work this hard so I do not have to live a simple life. But yet, I was very humbled. I'll go back to a story during COVID where I got stuck in India for March 2020. So the first flight that was arranged by the Vietnamese government to bring back Vietnamese citizens from India, me, my wife, and my daughter were the only 3 foreigners allowed on it. We didn't inquire as to what would happen when we arrive here. Hotel quarantine was not the practice here. We quarantined in military barracks, no air conditioning, shared bathrooms. That was very difficult for me to accept. I think I made myself so comfortable that I couldn't accept a simpler, a simple life or a lesser environment, let's say. But those 14 days, was very humbling, and it taught me that being able to live a simple life is a skill that I would like to give my daughter, our future generations as well, because I think it's important. Being able to appreciate the luxury, that's fine. You can afford it, great, do it. If that what gives you happiness, but being able to then dial back, sit on the floor, have a simple meal, and extracting happiness from that as well is important.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that and the realization that you had about simple life. So, if you had to use three words to describe thriving, what are the three words that you would use?
Motivation is this excitement about something. So exuberance. So
Yes.
motivation, exuberance, and hard work.
We define sustainability as the ongoing thriving of a living system. And in your business, especially garment manufacturing, how does that show up?
We are one of the industries, the entire supply chain from spinning all the way to consumer on the shelf. We are labeled as one of the bigger culprits, have added more strain on our environment, right? So I do accept that we're using all this water to dye our fabrics, all these resources to make all the other raw materials before and after that. So there definitely is an impact. And with fast fashion also, which we are guilty of being part of, the consumer's mindset is buy cheap, use it a few times, and then throw it out. But that has a genuine strain on our environment. So we're involved. There are some newer technologies where waterless dyeing is possible. Fabrics have to be made from recycled yarn, which are coming from recycled plastic bottles, and organic cotton, which is not using the pesticides and not other chemicals that are environment. Our factory is RCS certified, so that's Recycled Claim Standard. It's a standard platform for which traceability along the recycled polyester supply chain from end to end is to sort of a way to prove that the product that we have labeled is made from 50% polyester is indeed recycled, right? There are players that will falsify this for financial gain. We will put things together with the solutions that are available to us.
In terms of new machinery that will help you to save electricity consumption or to recycle things. And
solar was one, but unfortunately where we are in Namding, where our factory is, the sun coverage, or at least the number of sunny days that we need in the year to make it viable, wasn't there. So we had to abandon that. We don't use a lot of electricity. Garment manufacturing, sewing machines are generally light on electricity. The bigger power consumers are more upstream.
Let's move on to some fun questions. What is your favorite book?
I am not much of a reader. But when I was younger, Of Mice and Men, and another one, Of My Family and Other Crazy Animals by Gerard Durrell.
Do you have a favorite travel destination?
There's a few. Thailand is probably on the top of my list. We bought a house in Koh Samui last year.
Now, if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, who would it be?
Right now, Donald Trump.
Yeah, right now.
Right now, Donald Trump. I would like to sit down at dinner with him and understand how this calculation was made and what are the real concerns behind it, because highly destructive.
What's the best advice that you ever received?
This supplier of mine once told me, saying, this is cheap to buy, but expensive to use.
That's a good one. Do you have bad advice that you got?
Oh, I generally delete those from my memory. I don't know.
Now, if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
To clone myself. I could be in multiple meetings at the same time.
I got that. Oh, well, Ravi, I've enjoyed our chat. I love the authentic sharing, especially coming from a family business background. We don't often get such guests. You've actually transitioned from that family business to now a founder-led business, so that's also good.
I hope that the content you created today is helpful for your viewers or your listeners. Thank you very much once again to have me.